Across the Western world, there is currently an insidiously unfolding coup d'état, taking place simultaneously on many different levels, the like of which has never happened before in known history, but which has been planned for several decades since the birth of technocracy in the United States in the 1930s. This coup is not carried out with guns and explosives, but legally, by corrupt politicians and officials, under the guidance of an elite. Power is being transferred, by stealth, from individual nation-states to supranational actors, organizations, and megacorporations. It all happens legally, as laws are rewritten according to the wishes of the globalists. These globalists have managed to sneak their representatives into almost every important position, in politics, in the civil service, in the judiciary, in the police, in the army. The whole Western world is saturated with these globalist lackeys. The citizens have been sleeping a rosy sleep, and only in the last few years is the general public slowly waking up to this technocratic nightmare. No single rational person or state would voluntarily surrender its sovereignty to such supranational actors if it knew the history of the agenda and the actors behind it. That is why the globalists have been determinedly working below the surface for so long and have been able to advance their agenda in secret. It will look like a great booming, buzzing confusion, but an entrant around national sovereignty, eroding it piece by piece, will accomplish much more than the old-fashioned frontal assault. Now that so many citizens in different countries are beginning to see where the world is heading in terms of the Agenda 2030 goals, the globalists are realizing that these 17 goals cannot be achieved voluntarily, but will require compulsory legislation, with states handing over decision-making to these technocratic actors. The result is a totalitarian system in which there is no longer any voluntarism or freedom, only rules, regulations, and punishments. In a word, totalitarianism. The globalists have developed an extremely clever system to mislead and deceive people. The 17 goals to change the world have been made to sound like a responsible, ethical, and moral guideline for improving the world. But it is all an illusion. It is all just a smokescreen to move the world inexorably towards the new world order sought by the globalists.
So I think you need a new world order that...
We've got to give them a stake in creating the kind of world order that I think all of us would like to see.
It is a new world order with significantly different and radically new challenges for the future.
In this period, when really a new world order can be created, it's a great opportunity.
It is a big idea, a new world order.
The UN's Agenda 2030 is not voluntary, and the 17 goals to change the world have not been promoted on flimsy grounds. The globalists who create and promote the agenda for application to nation-states are above national politics. The United Nations, the World Economic Forum, and the European Union promote technocracy and involve decision-makers, civil servants, and statesmen in their own agendas. And these people are engaged in promoting what is harmful to the people and the state. This is not based on democracy, but on forcing an agenda into society and being extremely reluctant to accept any criticism. The result is that everything is regulated, based on environmental or carbon credits, and decided by the top political players that the people have not even heard about, voted on, or made a choice about. There is no escaping the agenda. It is integrated into so many different social activities, and most citizens, including those who support the agenda, don't even know what it is about, what it is based on, and why it is being pushed with such huge resources and propaganda to different countries. Finland, which thinks too much about the interests and welfare of other states and international actors, as a globalist-led state, is not leaving the UN or the EU until the people clearly demand it. When you look critically at Agenda 2030 and examine these 17 goals to change the world, while observing what is happening and has happened in the world over the last few years, you realize that the whole agenda is just a huge distraction from what this agenda is really about. Goal number 1. No poverty. End poverty in all its forms everywhere. At the moment, there is no evidence that poverty or hunger is going anywhere. On the contrary, income inequalities are widening, and the middle class in particular is losing its value. Globally, hundreds of billions have been given in development aid to developing countries over the decades, but poverty has still not been eradicated. The goal is megalomaniacal, and such a situation cannot be achieved except under a communist system, where misery is shared equally by all and people are forced to act in a certain way. This goal is egalitarianism, in which people from different starting points are artificially granted the same rights as others, even if they have in no way deserved them. Goal number 2. Zero hunger. End hunger, achieve food security and improve nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture. Already today, we see that the aim is to drive down all forms of natural nutrition and replace it with artificially manufactured substitutes. Laboratory meat, eating insects, genetically modified food. Finland has no relevance or role to play in world hunger. Finland has been helping with the Hunger Day collection for decades, with no significant results. Finland should not try to solve problems that cannot be solved from outside. The real objective seems to be to do away with all natural cultivation and breeding and move to completely artificially created varieties. Goal number 3. Good health and well-being. Ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. Again, we have already seen that the aim is to suppress all natural treatments and cures and replace them with synthetic and artificial methods. There has been talk of nanotechnology and human chipping. The wildest aim is so-called transhumanism, in which man and machine are combined into a functional whole. In recent years, we have seen clearly that the state is a complete health tyrant for its citizens. There has even been talk of forced vaccination and isolation of the unvaccinated from the rest of society, in flagrant violation of the Constitution. Healthcare system has been run down, and Finland is in the process of adopting the World Health Organization's pandemic agreement, which will hand over Finland's sovereignty in health matters to a supranational organization. The real objective seems to be to create a global health tyranny, where nothing is decided locally and all rules and regulations come from globalist actors. Goal number 4. Quality education. Ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. In practice, the opposite is true. In education, anti-biology and anti-history ideas are obsessively pushed to confuse school children. Anxiety and fear have increased exponentially, especially among children and young people. Violence in schools is also on the increase, partly as a result of immigration from third countries. Censorship is on the increase, and those who criticize and are critical of the so-called official truth are silenced. Alternative media are slandered on behalf of the mainstream media, and only one truth prevails. Those with the wrong opinion are discriminated against. The real objective seems to be to create a citizenry that only thinks a certain way and to silence anyone who criticizes the official truth and thinks wrongly. Goal number 5. Gender equality. Achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. Finland is a pioneer in gender equality. Here, both women and men have equal opportunities to participate in decision-making, working life, and other social affairs. But even this self-evident fact has been made a problem by the woke craze of recent years. Individuality is emphasized, and children and young people are encouraged to see themselves and others in a new way, completely against biology and moral values. Children's and young people's minds are confused with artificial genders. At the same time, the nuclear family is dismantled and perversions are presented as normal. Classical traditionalist roles have endured long enough to allow for existence and healthy development. One of the most damaging social phenomena, which is also inherent in the nature of the UN, is the clouding of young people's perceptions and the exposure of traditional masculinity in a toxic light. The real objective seems to be to rot society by normalizing perversions and breaking down the traditional concept of the family. A family made up of father, mother, and children, girls and boys. Goal number 6. Clean water and sanitation. Ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. More and more people are pointing out how chemicals mixed with drinking water are not good for us. And recently, there has even been talk of a shortage of clean water, which seems to be the next big global crisis. Finland has enough water, and we need to protect our water resources. Finland must not sell or give water rights to any other country. Other countries' water problems are not caused by Finland and are not a problem for Finns. Water use will be regulated and controlled because it is an energy resource and a commodity that people cannot use as they wish, even if they can, given the availability of water. Large international megacorporations have already acquired ownership of water resources in several countries, and there has also been talk in Finland of selling water resources to private ownership. The real objective seems to be to make people believe that access to clean water is a problem and thus to control and regulate this vital element by big business and the state. Goal number 7. Affordable and clean energy. Ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. Electricity supplies have become increasingly uncertain and energy prices have become more expensive, sometimes even multiplying. Fully operational and viable energy plants have been shut down. The use of peat, worth hundreds of billions of euros in Finland, has virtually ceased. Until recently, Finns have been faced with the most absurd energy-saving initiatives and problems of energy availability and price. Finland has never had to do this before, and would not have to do it now if our decision-makers were not constantly making stupid decisions and slavishly complying with international agreements in connection with Agenda 2030. What kind of energy Finland uses has no bearing on the global ecosystem. But what does matter to Finns is whether the supply and use of energy is reliable and affordable. Finns can safely use fossil fuels and buy them from reliable partners. The real objective seems to be to get people to switch from internal combustion engine cars to electric cars. to stop heating their homes with wood and heating oil and to switch to fully electric systems that can be easily monitored and controlled by public authorities. Goal number 8. Decent work and economic growth. Promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. Throughout the life of Agenda 2030, the Finnish economy has weakened. There is no evidence that the agenda has improved Finland's situation by any of these indicators. Sustainable economic growth involves vast amounts of technology, products, services, development, and design, which are not necessary in principle, but which create a new controlled system and bring industry and society up to sustainability standards. Finland does not need to promote any development-oriented practices. Instead, entrepreneurship and work should be encouraged and supported. Already today, Finland has a shortage of practical professional skills, yet the university and higher education is promoted in a disproportionate way to vocational training. The green transition is being aggressively pursued, and this is increasing debt and putting whole countries in debt bondage. Finland already has the highest taxes in the world, and our leaders want to raise taxes even higher. Instead of cutting spending on completely unnecessary items, such as development aid, support for Ukraine, the budget of the Finnish Broadcasting Corporation, our decision-makers prefer to target these measures at working Finns, thus further worsening Finland's economic situation. The real objective seems to be to drive countries and citizens into perpetual debt slavery, making it easier to direct and control both through international financial institutions and those who manipulate them. Goal number 9. Industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation. So-called sustainable industry and innovation will be built on the Agenda 2030 themes, and society as a whole will be shifted towards a measurable and controllable model through a green transition. We have already seen how, for example, businesses in the center of Helsinki have declined when the green idea is pushed too far. Expensive cycle lanes have been built, but at the same time services have deteriorated. We are led to believe that the green transition will create more jobs than it displaces from traditional manufacturing and service industries. We are also told that while this green transition will cost Finland hundreds of billions of euros, it will at the same time create new opportunities for Finland. We have already seen that these claims are completely without any basis in truth. New technologies, such as solutions based on artificial intelligence and robotics, will further reduce the need for labor and create entire groups of people who will no longer be part of the workforce but will become dependent on welfare and society. The real objective seems to be that ordinary people own nothing, but are totally dependent on the state and its support. You will own nothing, and you will be happy. Goal number 10. Reduced inequalities. Reduce inequality within and among countries. The aim is to reduce inequalities by equalizing all. Everything should be seen, experienced, and valued equally, despite the extremely different nature of things. This will be achieved through large-scale immigration and population change. Globalists such as George Soros are spending hundreds of millions to support migrations from third countries to Europe and the United States. It is also worth asking whether every race, ethnicity, origin, or sexual orientation is currently promoted equally in the West. And if not, why not? The real objective seems to be the equalization of citizens, making it easier to manage and control the population and to value them in the same way. Goal number 11. Sustainable cities and communities. Make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. People are being driven from the countryside to the cities by making single-family housing so expensive, for example, through increases in the price of electricity and taxation, that people can no longer afford to live in single-family houses, but are forced to move to urban housing and preferably to rented housing. The agenda is driving 15-minute cities, which aim to make people live in small spaces, be easily controllable, use digital money, food delivery services and public transport, and spend less time in the natural environment. The real objective seems to be a Chinese-style control system, where you can't get anywhere and you can't do anything if your so-called social credit score is too low. Goal number 12. Responsible consumption and production. Ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. The aim is to make production and service processes sustainable. This is about propaganda and controlling consumption attitudes towards food, property, utilities, travel, transport, etc. The aim is to make citizens more dependent on social systems and systems that further passivate people and silence critical voices. This type of people is easier to control and manipulate, depending on the situation and the needs of the moment. The real objective seems to be to achieve a so-called universal basic income, to abolish the use of cash, to introduce a so-called CBDC, a central bank digital currency with a best before expiry date that can be used to direct people's spending behavior only to items permitted by the state. Goal number 13. Climate action. Take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. People have been scared by climate crises for decades, and nothing catastrophic has happened. Now that the climate in Finland is not warming, we are being scared of another ice age. More and more measures will be targeted at reducing carbon dioxide and preventing climate change. Under this nonsense, absurd projects are being carried out, such as capturing carbon dioxide from the air, preventing sunshine, or reducing methane emissions from cows. The real objective seems to be that when people are constantly intimidated by various climate disasters, many people give up and are ready to hand over all decision-making power to supranational actors. Goal number 14. Life below water. Conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. The city of Helsinki, which uninhibitedly promotes Agenda 2030 and cooperates with the World Economic Forum, is an excellent example of double standards on the agenda. This goal is to protect water bodies from pollution and waste entering the sea, yet Helsinki continues to dump plowing snow and associated waste into the sea. Water bodies and water use will be more closely monitored and managed. Globalists have already started to talk about an international water crisis, which is a prelude to a situation where countries' water resources will have to be managed, for example by the UN, and nation-states will lose their rights to their own water resources. There has already been discussion in Finland about a ban on herring fishing, and that fish should also be reported in connection with so-called recreational fishing. The real objective seems to be the regulation and transnational management of all waters and resources, and the elimination of all forms of fishing not authorized by the state. Goal number 15. Life on land. Protect, restore, and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, sustainably manage forests, combat desertification, and halt and reverse land degradation and halt biodiversity loss. Already, the world is seeing land ownership and agricultural land being concentrated in the hands of a few. Farms and farmers are mistreated by the state in many countries, and as a result, in several European countries, farmers have risen up to challenge government attitudes to the countryside and the role of farms in society. In Finland, too, we are seeing the same trend in rural areas, and many farmers have already been forced to close down. In practice, protecting or restoring terrestrial ecosystems means that someone outside Finland decides how we use our forests. Finland has always drawn its culture and life from the forest. It is not for anyone else to say how we should use our forest for the benefit of those others. Forests are our national property and should not be touched by any globalist who does not respect Finland. The real objective seems to be to control the use of all land, to remove private land ownership and agriculture and give it to big international corporations. Goal number 16. Peace, justice, and strong institutions. Promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. Violence is on the rise in the West because problems are not recognized and proper solutions are not put in place, even when people are aware of them. The efficient and accountable institutions mentioned in the objective refer to giant megacorporations in the so-called public-private partnership models, which means increasing cooperation and partnership between the public and private sectors, leading to technocracy. Small and medium-sized enterprises are an obstacle to this model, which is why the activities of these smaller companies are constantly being hampered. Corruption has become more the rule than the exception in Finland. Corruption is more blatant and increasingly common, especially the activities that take place in state organizations and in national and global politics. The so-called Chinese model is being created in European countries with social credit scores and extensive day-to-day controls and identification of citizens.
I respect China's achievements, which are tremendous over the last over 40 years. I think it's a role model for many countries.
The real objective seems to be to keep people in a constant state of uncertainty and fear through various real and imaginary crises. Sometimes there is talk of a deadly pandemic and other diseases, sometimes of the threat of war, sometimes of international terrorism, but behind it all is the need to control and manipulate the public. Goal number 17. Partnerships for the goals. Strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development. Supporting the implementation of sustainable development and the global partnership is not voluntary but coercive. The global partnership is being implemented through a continuous transfer of population from Africa and other third countries to Europe and the United States. The aim is to get all developed countries fully committed to development aid. On the contrary, development aid should be abolished. There is no justification for it. It does not help the recipient country or the assisting country. It is detrimental to Finland and takes attention and resources away from more important national projects. Supporting sustainable development means more technology, force-feeding of a new way of thinking by various official bodies, more immigration and diversity, and so on. Global partnership is gradually being forced through the UN's Sustainable Development Goals to all countries of the world, with the UN acting above all nation-states, creating the basis for a single world government. If the globalists now implement these 17 objectives through Agenda 2030, the technocracy will have achieved its ultimate goal.